Nobody in the meatpacking district paid much attention to the old man who sat every night outside Lena's diner on West 14th Street, right where the cobblestones end and the indifference begins. New York City had a way of turning people invisible. The subway buskers, the guys selling lussies on the corner, the women pushing carts full of aluminum cans down the same avenues where hedge fund managers jogged at 6 in the morning. The city didn't see them. It just stepped around them. His name, as far as anyone at the diner knew, was Walter. No last name offered, none asked for. He was somewhere in his late 70s, though the street had a way of adding decades to a man's face. He wore the same army green field jacket every single night regardless of season, the kind the Army-Navy surplus on 8th Avenue used to sell before it became a boutique moving distressed denim for $400 a pair. His boots were cracked at the soles. His hands were enormous, knuckles swollen, like a man who had worked with them his entire life and let the work keep the receipt. Every evening around 9, he'd settle into the same spot, the third step from the bottom on the stoop next door, and watch the foot traffic like someone watching a river. Patient, almost peaceful, never holding a cardboard sign, never making a scene, just existing, which in that particular zip code was already a kind of protest. Camille Washington was the one who first brought him food, not because she felt sorry for him, not because she wanted to be somebody's hero. She just didn't like seeing anyone go hungry on her watch. That was how they did things in Flatbush, Brooklyn, a neighborhood with its own kind of code, the kind you absorb through jerk chicken smoke on summer Sundays and the sound of dominoes cracking plastic tables outside the bodega on Flatbush Avenue. You don't let people go hungry if you can help it. That's it. That's the whole sermon. Camille had been working Lena's for 3 years by then. She was 29, quick on her feet, the kind of waitress who remembered your usual after the second visit and your name after the first. She had student loan debt, a studio apartment in Crown Heights she shared with a cat named Malcolm, and exactly zero patience for customers who snapped their fingers to get her attention. But for Walter, she had all the time in the world. It started simple. A bowl of soup, she told the kitchen, was a mistake order. A plate of cornbread that fell off the menu. Coffee that somehow refilled itself every 45 minutes with no ticket attached. She'd bring it out between her tables, slide it onto the step beside him without much ceremony. Maybe say cold tonight, huh? Or eat before it gets stiff. And Walter would nod, take the food with both hands like he was receiving something sacred, and say thank you in a voice so quiet and deliberate it almost felt formal. They didn't have long conversations in those early months, just small ones, the kind built out of weather and neighborhood gossip and the general state of the city. Walter had opinions, sharp ones. He'd watch a Tesla pull up to the curb and say something like, "Used to be you could tell a man's character by his shoes. Now they just hide it in the car." Camille would laugh, and he'd crack that slow smile of his, the one that rearranged every line on his face. She never asked him how he ended up on the street. In Flatbush, you learned early that some stories belonged to the person carrying them, and your job wasn't to reach in and take it. You fed people. You treated them decent. You let them be whole in your presence. The rest was between them and God. The other girls at Lena's thought she was sweet for it. Marcus, the line cook from the Bronx, who blasted old Biggie during the slow hours, called Walter Camille's grandpa. Once, and she gave him a look that shut that down permanently. Lena herself, a stocky Greek-American woman from Astoria, who had owned the place for 22 years and kept a picture of Barack Obama next to a picture of her mother on the register, never said a word about the food Camille was quietly running out the back. Maybe she knew. Probably she did. She just let it be. Winter came in hard that year the way it sometimes does in New York, not gradually, but all at once, like the city decided to stop pretending. The kind of cold that makes the steam rising from the manhole covers look less like infrastructure and more like the whole island exhaling. Camille started bringing Walter a paper bag at the end of her shift, whatever was left from the kitchen, wrapped tight, sometimes a pair of those little hand warmer packets she bought herself from the Duane Reade on 14th. One night in February, she came out with the bag, and Walter wasn't on the stoop. She stood there for a moment in the wind, bag in hand, feeling something she didn't have an immediate name for. She walked half a block in each direction, checked the doorway of the old loading dock where she'd seen him sit when the rain came sideways. Nothing. She went back inside and finished her side work with that feeling still sitting in her chest, the kind of low-grade worry that doesn't announce itself but just hums. He was back the next night. Said he'd found a bed at the shelter on 30th for the worst of the cold snap. She exhaled and didn't say anything except good. Then she went inside and brought him a full plate, turkey, greens, cornbread, and sat on the step beside him for the first time. Her coat pulled tight, and they talked for almost an hour. About Brooklyn in the 80s. About a woman he'd loved in Harlem 40 years ago. About how the city used to have a smell to it that it didn't have anymore. Something about the old pavement, the old wood. Something underneath the concrete that newer cities never developed. "You ever think about leaving?" she asked him. He looked down the block toward the lights of the High Line glowing in the dark above the old rail structure. "Where would I go?" he said. "This city owes me about 40 years of a good time. I'm still collecting." She laughed. He smiled. The steam rose off the manhole covers between them and disappeared into the February sky. Spring came. Then summer, the kind that hits the meatpacking district like a dress code. Everyone's suddenly younger and louder and expensively underdressed. The clubs on Little West 12th spilling bass onto the street at midnight. The tourists crowding the Whitney Museum 2 blocks up. The whole neighborhood performing its own version of itself. Lena's stayed full from 6 to close every night. Camille got a raise. 30 cents more an hour, which in New York felt like a symbolic gesture and nothing more. But she took it with grace. She'd started picking up an extra shift on Sundays to cover the rent increase her landlord had slipped under her door in April. The kind of envelope that every Crown Heights tenant had learned to open braced for impact. Walter noticed she was tired. Not in an obvious way. She never complained. Never let the tables see her drag. But he noticed the way she checked her phone less between her shifts outside with him. The way she'd rest her head back against a brick wall for a moment before going in, eyes closed, like she was downloading something from a silence. "You all right, Camille?" "I'm fine, Walter." "You eat those greens." "I'm 81 years old. I eat what I want." She looked at him. "You never told me you were 81. You never asked." She thought about that for a second. Then she said, "Happy belated everything then." He laughed, a real one from somewhere deep. And for a moment the weariness lifted from both of them, and they were just two people on a stoop in New York City in the middle of summer, which was, when you thought about it, one of the better things a person could be. It was a Tuesday in October when the black cars arrived. Not one, not two. 6 of them, black Escalades, factory tint, the kind of fleet you see outside power lunches in Midtown or pulling up to the side door at JFK when someone very important lands quietly. They parked in a perfect row along West 14th like they owned the block, which, as it turned out, was not entirely far from the truth. 3 men in dark suits went into Lena's first. Lena came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel, and Camille watched her face cycle through confusion, recognition, and something harder to read, a kind of stunned stillness, the way a person looks when a thing they stopped expecting finally shows up. The suits asked everyone to keep serving, keep working. Everything was fine. One of them, tall, silver-haired, very good shoes, asked Lena if they could use the back corner for a private meeting. She said yes before he finished the sentence. Then a 4th man walked in. He was older, mid-70s at least, maybe older. He wore a charcoal wool overcoat, the kind that costs more than most people's rent. His hair was white. His posture was the posture of a man who had never needed to make himself smaller. He moved through the diner slowly, deliberately, looking at the booths, the counter, the black and white photographs Lena had on the walls. Old New York, the meatpacking workers in their aprons, the streets before the glass buildings came. He stopped in the middle of the room. Camille was standing near the counter with a coffee pot in her hand, watching him the way you watch something you can't immediately categorize. The man turned and looked at her, and there was something in that look, a recognition, or the shadow of one, that made her set the coffee pot down slowly. "Excuse me," he said. His voice was exactly the voice of the man on the stoop. Quiet, deliberate, almost formal. "Does this place still have cornbread?" The coffee pot hit the counter. His name was Walter Reeves. Not that Walter. The Walter, as in Reeves Capital Group, The private equity firm that had quietly bought or backed 11 buildings within 4 blocks of where they were standing. As in the Walter, whose name was on a wing of Mount Sinai Hospital up on 98th and Madison. As in the Walter who had, for reasons that would take the rest of the night to explain, been sitting on that stoop in a cracked boot army jacket for the better part of 8 months. He sat down in the back corner booth. The suits positioned themselves discreetly. He looked at Lena and told her he didn't want to buy her restaurant. He wanted to invest in it, on her terms, because it was one of the last places on West 14th that still smelled like New York used to smell, and he had personal reasons for wanting it to stay exactly as it was. Then he looked at Camille. She was still standing by the counter, arms crossed. The look on her face was not awe. It was not gratitude. It was the particular expression of a woman from Flatbush processing information carefully before she decided how to feel about it. "You want to explain yourself," she said. "Not a question." Walter, the real one, the whole one, folded his hands on the table the way he always folded them. Those enormous hands, those swollen knuckles. "I had a daughter," he said. "She worked a diner. Not this one. One up in Harlem back in 2003. She used to bring food to a man who sat outside. Every night. Didn't matter if she was tired. Didn't matter if the shift had been brutal." He paused. "She passed in 2004. Cancer. She was 31. The diner was very quiet. I've been wealthy my entire adult life," he continued. "And I've spent the last 20 years trying to figure out what that's supposed to mean. What you do with it. What it costs you, and what it gives back." He looked at his hands. "Last year my doctor told me my heart was doing something it shouldn't be. Nothing fatal, not yet. But the kind of news that makes a man want to sit outside for a while." "So you faked being homeless," Camille said. "I sat outside. I didn't fake anything. Your boots were busted. I bought those boots in 1987. I like those boots." Lena made a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and pressed her dish towel to her face. Walter looked at Camille steadily. "I wasn't testing you," he said. "I want to be clear about that. I wasn't running some kind of experiment. I just needed to sit somewhere that felt real. And every night you brought me food and sat with me for 10 minutes and treated me like a person, and he stopped, cleared his throat. "I hadn't felt like a person in a long time. That's all. That's the honest thing." Camille stood there for a long moment. The whole diner waited. Marcus had come out of the kitchen and was leaning against the pass-through. The other waitress, Deja, was frozen mid-table wipe. Even the customers who had no idea what was happening had gone quiet, caught in whatever current was moving through the room. Finally, Camille pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. "You want coffee?" she said. Walter blinked. "Yes," he said. "Please." She got up, got the pot, poured his cup, and sat back down. She poured one for herself, something she had never done on the floor in 3 years. "You should have told me," she said. "I know. Not because of—" she gestured vaguely at the suits, the cars outside, all of it. "Because I was worried about you. In February, when you weren't on the stoop, I stood out there in the cold like an idiot holding a paper bag." Something shifted in Walter's face. The composed, controlled expression of a man used to being in charge of every room. He entered cracked slightly at the edges, the way old wood does when the temperature changes. "I'm sorry," he said. "That one I'm genuinely sorry for." She nodded, looked at her coffee. "What did you mean about investing in the restaurant?" "On Lena's terms." "Whatever she needs," Walter said. "Renovations, if she wants them. Staff wages, real wages, not these." He said it plainly, without embarrassment. "And a fund for the building, so nobody can flip it under her feet." Lena lowered the dish towel from her face. "Why?" "Because my daughter loved a place like this," Walter said. "And it didn't exist anymore when I went looking for it. The story moved the way New York stories move. Fast, loud, then quiet again. A food blogger with 200,000 followers happened to be at a corner table that night and put it on her Instagram at midnight. By morning it had been picked up by the Post and the Daily News and a lifestyle site out of Brooklyn that usually covered things like artisanal hot sauce. By the afternoon it was everywhere, the way things get everywhere now, spread by people who didn't know Camille and didn't know Walter, but recognized something in the shape of it, something they needed to exist in the world. Walter's people called it a PR crisis. He fired the person who said that. Lena's filled up every night for the next 6 weeks with people who came specifically because of the story, which created a temporary logistical nightmare and required 2 new hires, both of whom Camille helped train. The donations people sent to the homeless man, before anyone knew who he was, had to be quietly redirected. The cornbread sold out every single night. But the actual story, the one that mattered, was smaller than all of that. It was the conversation Walter and Camille kept having. Not about money, not about the restaurant, but on the stoop. Same one. Every Tuesday night when her shift ended and the city was doing its late night thing around them. The cabs, the laughter from the bar down the block, the distant moan of a train somewhere below the street. He told her about his daughter, told her about Harlem in the 60s, about working the docks before he pivoted to finance, about the woman he'd loved who died before they figured out they should stay together. She told him about Flatbush, about her grandmother who never raised her voice but was somehow the loudest presence in every room she entered, about her own plans, the one she had put in a drawer during the years of survival and hadn't quite opened back up. "What's in the drawer?" he asked her one night. "I wanted to open a place," she said. "Not a diner. Something." She searched for the word. "Warm. A place that felt like Sunday." Walter nodded slowly, like someone confirming something they already suspected. "You know," he said, "I have some experience with real estate in this city." "I know," she said. "I Googled you. And you've done some good things," she said. "And you've done some things I'd want to talk to you about before we did anything together." He looked at her for a moment. That same look he'd had when he walked through the door of Lena's that October evening. Recognition, or the shadow of it. "Fair," he said. The steam rose off the manhole covers between them. A cab leaned on its horn 2 blocks east. Somewhere above them, the High Line was full of people looking at the lights of Jersey across the water, beautiful and close enough to almost touch, the way almost everything in New York was. The place Camille eventually opened was on Nostrand Avenue in Crown Heights, 3 blocks from where she'd grown up going to church with her grandmother. It was called Sunday, just that one word in warm letters above the door. It served food that tasted like it had been made for you specifically, oxtail and dumplings, shrimp and grits, a cornbread that people genuinely argued about on the internet. The music was always right. The lighting was always warm. There was no snapping fingers to get the attention of the staff, a policy posted quietly on the menu that regulars pointed out to first-timers with a kind of protective pride. Walter came on the opening night. He sat at the corner table, not because anyone had set it aside for him, but because that was the one with the best view of the room. He watched Camille move through the crowd the way he had watched the foot traffic on West 14th Street. Patient, almost peaceful, every detail landing. She was not serving tables tonight. She was just there, present in the whole thing, the way a person is when they've made something real. She brought him cornbread, set it on the table, without ceremony. "Well," she said. He took a bite, chewed slowly, looked out at the room where people were talking and laughing and eating and doing that specific thing people do when they're somewhere that makes them feel like they can exhale. "Your daughter would have liked this place," he said. Camille looked at him for a moment. Something passed through her face, not sadness exactly, but the kind of tenderness that lives right next to it. "Yeah," she said. "I think she would have." She went back to her restaurant. He finished his cornbread. Outside on Nostrand Avenue, Brooklyn was doing what Brooklyn always does, loud and alive and entirely itself, indifferent to anyone who had ever tried to define it from the outside, faithful to everyone who had ever loved it from within.